The wrestling world just got turned upside down, and what we thought we knew about Seth Rollins and his supposed exit from the Vision might have been the biggest work in recent WWE history. Before we dive into this absolute madness, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you're not going to want to miss what comes next. What looked like a devastating betrayal and a career-altering moment was actually something far more calculated and brilliantly executed than anyone could have imagined. Seth Rollins didn't just get kicked out of the Vision. He orchestrated the entire thing, and the reason why is going to blow your mind. Let's rewind to where this all started because context is everything here. The Vision was dominating WWE programming week after week, with Seth Rollins positioned as one of the key members alongside some of the company's most talented performers. They were unstoppable, taking out legends and current roster members alike with surgical precision. Then came that fateful episode where everything seemed to crumble. Rollins was suddenly on the receiving end of a brutal attack from his own stablemates. The beating was vicious and prolonged. Chairs were involved, tables were broken, and Rollins was left lying in a heap as his former brothers-in-arms stood over him. The announcers sold it like his career might be over. Social media exploded with reactions. Fans were genuinely concerned about what they had just witnessed. The weeks that followed only seemed to confirm the worst. Rollins was absent from television. The Vision continued their rampage without him, barely acknowledging his existence. When they did mention him, it was with disdain and dismissal. His spot had been filled. His contributions were erased. Everything pointed to a legitimate falling out behind the scenes. Dirt sheets started reporting tensions. Podcasters speculated about creative differences. The narrative was set in stone, or so everyone thought. But here's where things get interesting. Small details started emerging that didn't quite add up for those paying close enough attention. Rollins was spotted at the Performance Center during times when injured superstars typically wouldn't be training. His social media activity, while sparse, contained cryptic messages that seemed less like someone dealing with betrayal and more like someone counting down to something. There were reports from live event attendees claiming they saw Rollins backstage at shows where he had no advertised appearance. These breadcrumbs were dismissed as coincidence or wishful thinking by most, but they were there nonetheless. The real smoking gun came from an unexpected source. A production crew member, speaking on condition of anonymity, let slip that Rollins had been in multiple meetings with WWE's creative team throughout his entire absence. Not medical meetings. Not contract meetings. Creative strategy sessions. This person claimed that Rollins was more involved in the week-to-week storytelling than almost anyone else on the roster during this period. That revelation should have broken the internet, but the story got buried under other news cycles and most people never heard about it. Fast forward to the recent episode that changed everything. The Vision was in the middle of another assault, this time targeting a beloved veteran who had dared to speak out against them. The numbers game was overwhelming. Security couldn't stop them. Other wrestlers who tried to intervene were quickly dispatched. It looked like another successful mission for the group. Then the lights went out. The arena went pitch black. When they came back on, Seth Rollins was standing in the ring behind the Vision members, but he wasn't alone. He had brought backup, but not just any backup. These were people he had been secretly recruiting during his time away. Wrestlers who had their own scores to settle with the Vision. Wrestlers who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The brawl that ensued was absolute chaos. But what made it extraordinary was how coordinated Rollins and his team were. Every move seemed choreographed. Every counter was anticipated. The Vision, for all their dominance, looked genuinely rattled for the first time. They retreated up the ramp, but Rollins grabbed a microphone. What he said next confirmed what the sharpest fans had begun to suspect. He revealed that his removal from the Vision was never real. It was a plan he had pitched to the group's leadership weeks before it happened. The idea was simple but brilliant. By making everyone believe he was out, he could move freely without suspicion. He could recruit. He could plan. He could build an army right under everyone's noses. But why would the Vision agree to this? That's where the story gets even more complex. Rollins explained that the Vision had been so successful that they were running out of credible threats. No single wrestler could stand against them. No thrown-together team had the chemistry to compete. They needed a legitimate threat to keep their dominance meaningful. Rollins proposed that he leave the group publicly, take a beating to make it believable, and use his time away to construct the one thing that could challenge them, a unit built specifically to counter everything the Vision represented. The Vision's leaders saw the genius in this. They would maintain their dominance in the short term while simultaneously creating the foundation for a war that would define the next era of WWE programming. The execution of this plan required Oscar-worthy performances from everyone involved. The attack on Rollins had to look and feel real. Members of the Vision later admitted they held nothing back during that beating because they knew anything less would be spotted by smart fans immediately. Rollins took shots that left legitimate bruises and soreness. The emotional aspect had to be authentic too. Rollins cut promos during his absence that dripped with anger and pain. He unfollowed Vision members on social media. He liked tweets from fans expressing sympathy. Every detail was considered and implemented. During his time away from television, Rollins was anything but inactive. He reached out to wrestlers who had been injured by the Vision, offering them a chance at revenge. He contacted wrestlers who had been overlooked and underutilized, promising them spotlight opportunities. He even brought in some unexpected names from his past, calling in favors and rebuilding bridges that had been burned years ago. The team he assembled was diverse in style but unified in purpose. They trained together in secret, often at independent wrestling schools or private gyms to avoid WWE cameras. They studied Vision matches obsessively, breaking down patterns and identifying weaknesses. By the time Rollins made his return, they weren't just a collection of individuals. They were a tactical unit designed for one specific mission. The Vision's initial response to this revelation was fury mixed with something that looked like respect. They had agreed to the plan but perhaps hadn't fully grasped how seriously Rollins would take it or how effective the results would be. The group's spokesperson addressed the situation on the following week's show, acknowledging that while Rollins had indeed been operating with their knowledge, the army he built had become something beyond their control. What was supposed to be a manageable storyline threat had evolved into an actual threat to their dominance. The agreement was off. The kid gloves were coming off. This was now real. What makes this situation so fascinating from a meta perspective is how it blurs the lines between work and reality in ways WWE hasn't done in years. Yes, it's all predetermined. Yes, the outcomes are decided in advance. But the level of commitment to this long-term story, the willingness to let fans believe something false for months, and the payoff when the truth was revealed created genuine shock and excitement. Wrestling fans are notoriously difficult to surprise in the internet age. Information leaks constantly. Spoilers spread within minutes. Yet somehow WWE and everyone involved in this angle managed to keep the real story under wraps. The implications for upcoming programming are enormous. We now have two factions with legitimate heat between them, even if that heat was manufactured through cooperation. Rollins has positioned himself as the ultimate strategist, someone willing to sacrifice his own body and reputation for the sake of a larger plan. The Vision has been revealed as more complex than simple villains. They're master manipulators who were willing to weaken their own group temporarily for long-term gain. The wrestlers Rollins recruited now have instant credibility because they were handpicked for this specific war. Every matchup writes itself. Every promo has built-in drama. There's also the question of what happens next in this chess match. If Rollins was smart enough to fake his exit and build an army in secret, what other moves has he planned? If the Vision was calculating enough to approve this scheme, what countermeasures do they have ready? The beauty of this storyline is that it has reset the intellectual playing field. Neither side can be taken at face value. Every apparent mistake could be intentional. Every victory could be part of a larger trap. The audience is now conditioned to expect the unexpected, which is exactly where WWE wants them. Behind the scenes, this angle has apparently reinvigorated everyone involved creatively. Wrestlers in both groups have spoken in interviews about how refreshing it is to work on a story with this much depth and planning. The writing team has been praised for thinking long-term rather than week to week. Even wrestlers not directly involved have expressed interest in finding ways to insert themselves into the narrative. That kind of enthusiasm from the locker room often translates to better performances and more engaging television. The financial side of this cannot be ignored either. Merchandise sales for Rollins spiked after his return as fans rushed to support his new faction. Ticket sales for upcoming events where Vision vs. Rollins matches are advertised have been strong. Social media engagement around WWE content has increased measurably since the story began paying off. In an era where wrestling companies are constantly fighting for attention against endless entertainment options, anything that generates this level of buzz is valuable beyond measure. Critics of the angle have pointed out that it requires fans to accept a fairly complicated premise. Why would the Vision agree to weaken themselves? How did all these meetings and recruitment efforts stay secret in a company where everything leaks? Why didn't anyone in WWE management step in when they saw Rollins building a rogue faction? These are fair questions, and the answers require some suspension of disbelief. But wrestling has always required audiences to accept certain logical leaps. What matters is whether the emotional payoff justifies those leaps, and by most accounts, it absolutely does. Looking at historical parallels, WWE has attempted similar long con stories before with varying degrees of success. The higher power reveal, the Montreal Screwjob aftermath, and certain Shield breakup angles all played with the boundaries between reality and fiction. What sets this Rollins situation apart is the commitment to the bit over such an extended period and the willingness to let the audience be completely wrong about what was happening. That's a risky move because if the payoff doesn't land, you've wasted months of storytelling. But when it works, as it has here, the payoff creates moments that fans will remember and discuss for years. The wrestlers involved deserve immense credit for their performances throughout this arc, staying in character during public appearances, maintaining the illusion on social media, and keeping the secret from leaking required discipline that not every performer possesses. Rollins in particular has shown why he's considered one of the best all-around talents in the industry. He can work any style in the ring, he can deliver promos that feel completely authentic, and he can be trusted with complex storytelling that requires patience and subtlety. As this story continues to unfold, the possibilities seem endless. Will there be defections from either side? Will the original Vision members resent Rollins for creating such a dangerous enemy? Will someone from Rollins' recruited army turn out to be a double agent? The foundation has been laid for months of compelling television, and that's assuming WWE doesn't throw in additional swerves that we haven't even considered yet. What this situation ultimately represents is wrestling at its best. It respects the intelligence of the audience while still managing to work them. It creates investment in characters and outcomes. It generates conversation and debate. It makes people want to tune in next week to see what happens. In an era where so much wrestling content is available that fans can afford to be selective, creating must-see television is harder than ever. This Rollins and Vision saga has achieved that status, and it did so through old-school storytelling principles applied with modern execution. The wrestling business is built on moments that make fans believe, even if just for a second, that what they're watching is real. Seth Rollins faking his removal from the Vision created one of those moments when the truth was revealed. The shock, the excitement, and the realization that we had all been worked combined to produce genuine emotional reactions from audiences. That's the magic of professional wrestling when it's done right. If you enjoyed diving into this insane story and want more breakdowns of the wildest moments in wrestling, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because trust me, there's so much more chaos to cover.